charged, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. And so it's just kind of similar to other new technologies. It's you download an app, become a member. If you don't see one, you can find one on your cell phone. You unlock it and scan it. The wheel is locked. If you try and pick it up and move it, it kind of beeps at you, which they say is annoying to listen to. If you rip and vandalize it and you rip kind of the technology off of it, you have just a 30-pound foot scooter. So there's not a lot of benefit to doing that. These companies haven't seen a lot of vandalized devices at all. The challenges that localities are facing mainly has to do with they're new, and so depending on the state or the locality, it's how they're defined. They could be a vehicle, they could be a toy scooter, they could be similar to a bicycle, and it's all about the state code and the local ordinance. In Virginia, and it's mentioned in the memo, they're not considered vehicles. So they're regulated as such. Because they're new in all localities, it's been a challenge for the staff to figure out how to work with them. Additionally, riders have been a big issue, and their habits. You can see a picture of someone riding on a sidewalk, and those are also kind of how they're parked. It's been a drain on staff resources in some localities. Another reason is because of how the companies come into localities. It started as they just kind of show up overnight, literally, and sometimes figuratively. Now that the companies have realized that's not necessarily the best way to do business, they've hired consultants and lobbyists, but also government affairs staff to work with localities. And in some cases, as those conversations come to a standstill, or the private sector isn't happy with the speed at which the public sector moves, they come in localities anyway. We've been lucky enough in Charlottesville not to experience that yet. And so I think as we move along and I finish up, our program kind of highlights on a couple things that I think fit well within Charlottesville. The first one being that we would proactively work with these companies to essentially be partners with them instead of kind of in an adversarial relationship, as in many cities that's happened. We would retain the right to say where the scooters could be parked in the public right of way, which then we would allow that to be in all sorts of neighborhoods as well. We would work with the companies to develop corrals in the business corridor, so from the downtown mall to the corner, so you don't see those clustered scooter stations and parking corrals, where we could mitigate some of those and ensure there's ADA access to the community. And also they're developing technology which would slow down scooters if they go into areas that the scooters are not allowed, and the city would have the right to say what those areas are. We could slow it down, and then also in our policy we have what we're calling a no-go zone, which would allow the scooters not to be locked by the rider, so they would still be responsible for the scooter, which would then just essentially make them turn around and go back out of the slow-go zone and no-go zone. Downtown mall is an example of that. If we set up a geo-fenced area and a scooter went into it, they would get an alert that there was a restricted area, and they would have to turn around. If they tried to park their scooter, they wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't be able to lock it with their smartphone, so they'd still be responsible for it. The pilot that's before you tonight, and we can have a conversation about and answer any questions, it allows us as a city to be proactive towards the scooter companies and the bike companies that are interested in coming here. It also enhances our transportation network, especially the last mile transportation options that are available. There's a daily device fee that will help build the bike ped infrastructure, give a dedicated source of funding. And then also it could generate new income for city folks. These companies either hire or contract with folks to come around at night or when the batteries are running low on these chargers to charge them. That can take up to 4 hours, and workers are paid per device based on how low the batteries are, so they could get anywhere from $5 to $25. And so if you look at our pilot, which we're aiming for 200 scooters, and you kind of average it out, and back of the envelope math is almost $500,000 in new income coming to the area for the Charlottesville's workforce. So those are just a few of the highlights of what we've been working on. Happy to answer any questions. Amanda Ponce, the bike ped coordinator for the city, is also here and can help answer questions as well.
So it's a $500 application fee, and then $1 a day per device, and then 20 cents per minute?
It's $1 to unlock it. and then it's 15 or 20 cents per minute.
But then there's a revenue source to the, you're getting confused. The revenue to the city is also $1 a day a device, separate from us. So as a consumer, you pay that per use plus the mileage, and what we get as a city is, wasn't that right? There was
That's
$1
correct.
per day.
$1 per day per device, per day, yeah,
And
plus the fee.
so from UVA to the downtown mall is where?
They could go anywhere. So we've identified that area that you mentioned is kind of the business commercial corridor where we would have more say on where these devices could be parked.
Yeah, because that's pretty tight.
Very tight.
Can I ask, couple, am I cutting you off? So a couple questions. How far can they go on a charge? So if a company were to say, we want to use them to get to somewhere out on, I don't know, people driving on the Warner Parkway or something like that in the bike lane, I mean, is that, how far can they go on a charge without it? Do you all know?
Well, I think it varies because we obviously have some hills and that's the drain on the battery, so a typical device on a flat surface is about 15 miles, but most of that would be on a full
15
battery
miles.
charge.
Huh.
Full battery
Okay.
charge. Most of the trips that are taken are very short trips, like a mile or 2
Yeah.
miles.
And how fast do they go? The max?
In our pilot program, we had 15 miles an hour as the max.
15.
15, but that's
And
not
is it?
considering down a hill.
So this is something I don't know. Like, is there any law about whether bikes can go on sidewalks in Charlottesville? Is that, I don't, do we have any?
So
Legal restrictions on that?
The state code is that the city has the ability to designate areas where bikes are not to be ridden, but there has to be conspicuous signs posted that bikes can be ridden. So the downtown mall is a very
Downtown mall
clear
says that,
area
right.
that is not allowed to be ridden for bikes, or scooters for that matter.
But nowhere else in Charlottesville?
But we don't have signs on other
Interesting.
sidewalks
Okay.
and things like that.
So right now, it's legal to ride bikes on sidewalks. People, technically, or, no, not technically, it is legal.
Technically, it would be.
It is legal,
But,
okay.
but saying that, one thing about this particular aspect is the city obviously has control over its streets and sidewalks. And
Right.
entering into this agreement kind of turns that paradigm on its head, because in effect, they're asking you right now through this regulation for your permission to use your bike lane. And so I think implicitly in that is you cannot ride these as part of the regulations on your sidewalk.
So we do say,
So-
is that what the pilot?
Within the
is?
regs, yes, within the
Great, that
regulations,
sounds
yes.
wise.
Now, I have a question, and I think I got a response from the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee that, is there a sense of where they are on this? Because this is taking up the bike lane.
Yeah, we did talk about it on a couple of occasions, and for the most part, the committee was in favor. There was all but one person who felt supportive of, having the scooters and bike share come to the city. So, yeah, they felt that it was a boost to all alternative modes of transportation to have additional users.
Okay, just real quick, how much more time would y'all like?
I think 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay, all right.
I have a very narrow question.
Well, I was just saying, I mean, it is just a pilot, and I did read when I was going through it that at any time, this guy can say, we're done.
Yeah.
I did try it out in Denver a couple weeks ago when I was there, because I knew this was coming, and I was interested in just experiencing it, and there are certainly pros, but there are other cons, and my biggest concern is just junking up our sidewalks with just these parked scooters, and at one point I asked Mr. Ness, like, can they just leave it in my yard? And like, once you're outside of that corridor, it really could be found anywhere. And so I think it is important that we're careful. And I think these numbers, the limits that we're putting on this allow us to do this in a really calculated way, just to kind of see how it's going to work. And then also just have the flexibility that it can be pulled if we just don't think this is the direction that we want to go and it's competing with other modes of transportation in a negative way. So I think it's kind of low risk for what we're looking at here as a pilot. What's your narrow question?
Yeah, my narrow question is about safety and helmets. Are there any practices emerging about this stuff? I asked this, I used to have a motorcycle and you had to have a helmet in Virginia, but in Maine you don't. And like you see, but then I just had a friend pass away from an accident on a scooter.
You had a
and
motorcycle?
Vespa. He had a Vespa, yeah, I did. 5 years.
Okay.
Honda Shadow, 750. American Classic.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Side of me you don't know. But yeah.
Glory
So, but
days.
I'm curious. Yeah, right.
There-
Pre-kid days.
Yeah, similar to bikes, there's not a law for helmets to be required, but we are strongly encouraging that the users, and I know many of the companies do require.
They
you know,
do.
Some of them
how
They
do
require it. I mean,
may require, some require.
But we can't require that in
we-
an ordinance. or
We can't
others.
require it.
Okay, under Virginia law? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's my understanding,
But
yeah.
bikes you can require?
No, we
But
don't
14
require,
and
unless you're
under.
14 and under.
14 and under
Oh,
are
I see.
required.
Can,
but-
but not over 14.
All right, okay.
That's a good point, though. I mean, when I rented mine, like, that was one of the things is you're wearing a helmet. I'm like, I'm on vacation. I don't just walk around with a helmet. And I mean, I went up and down the street once
No, I
just
don't
to
think,
try it.
I'm
So.
just curious what our stance would be.
No, it's just interesting, like, how different it is, because that was a different state, and it seemed like that was part of it, but,
And,
So is there a disclaimer when they swipe their card or? Okay.
yeah.
and, yeah, and another thing I was gonna mention is we are asking them to submit sort of community outreach plans, and many of the companies that we've talked to have kind of free helmet giveaways and things like that as part of their outreach that they do, so that's just another way to get helmets in the hands of people who would need them, who should have them.
Okay.
So if we're approving this, I'm just curious, at least one of them has applied for a business license. Like, how does this work in terms of logistically now from this step forward? Like, when will we start seeing these things on the ground?
That's a good question. So we have a draft application that we need to finalize, but in the pilot, it says, I think November 13th is the earliest it could start. The companies would need to fill out the application and get that approved and kind of address all the different questions we have on it. So after that would get approved, I guess the earliest would be November 13th.
We're anticipating multiple companies involved here.
Multiple companies have expressed an interest, yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work and for being proactive about this.
Yeah, I
Thank
think it's
you.
good to get ahead of it. So you don't have to drop it in.
Is there a motion?
I move we draft a resolution recommending the adoption of the bicycle and e-scooter sharing system, otherwise known as dockless mobility, permit program.
Second.
All right. And all in favor? All right. Carries 5-0. Thank you.
For scooters.
All right, so other business, we had E from the consent agenda, and,
What?
E, right, it was E, right?
Yes,
the meeting-
Okay.
Burley.
Okay.
Utility.
And so I'm clear now, I don't have any other questions.
Oh, what was the answer?
Yes,
Yes, they met the time frame that's specified
Oh, okay.
in the policy, which is in less than 60 days.
So I move we adopt the resolution of the utility leak credit to Albemarle County Schools at Burley Middle School, in the amount of $27,842.88.
Second.
all right. All in favor? All right,
Start on.
carries.
And Ms. Galvin, I think do we need to make that appointment? Did
There's
they ask
something
you
I-
about that?
Yes. Yes, Mayor Walker, we have to make a motion for an appointment. So I move that we appoint Heather Hill to serve on the Thomas Jefferson Planning Commission Regional Housing Partnership, and for Mayor Walker to serve as her alternate.
All right. Is there a
I'll
motion?
second that.
All in favor? All right, and is that all for other business?
Mayor Walker, I was wondering, did we have to talk about participatory budgeting, or did that get resolved? I wasn't sure. I saw some emails, and there was something that came out.
I think it
About-
got resolved.
Did it get resolved?
What was the outcome?
That there was an additional membership was going to be added, and there was a question of whether or not that needed to come back to council, or was that something that was already latitude built into there's a review group? Does that ring any bells?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was asked by Matt Murphy whether I had any names. I didn't
Oh, okay.
initiate the conversation, and so then I just gave him Shamora Cooper's and Elliot Brown's names to maybe reach out to them and see. And then I reached out to see if they would be interested, and that was it. And I sent them
Okay, so
names.
there's, I just was misunderstood.
We had some discussion internally today. Obviously, council's had some discussions in public about the idea of, soliciting not just from one counselor. I've talked with Matthew, and, I think it's clear where we're headed. If council endorses adding the extra 2 people, which, is perfectly fine with the consultant we've engaged, we're prepared to get that process started right away.
Okay, thanks.
So are we leaving it at the 6 that are established, or do we want to add 2 additional people to make it, I guess, 8?
I don't have any problem with adding if it seems like that's going to be better for the process.
Okay,
Okay. 3 staff members, 5 citizens.
great.
Great.
All right. Now we're at the second, the matters by the public. Is there anyone that would wish to speak?
Good evening again.
Good evening.
Just need to point out to you all that for at least the last 18 months now, we've been begging for transparency and openness. So if this conversation on New Hill, which again, I don't have anything against the project, but if that's been in discussion for 17 months and it's just now hitting the floors of the council chambers, you all have failed in that mission again. So just please keep that in mind moving forward. That's the one thing that kept ringing clearly and loudly throughout all the issues that we dealt with as a city over the last year and a half. And once again, we're right back at this point.
What does city council have to do with New Hill?
I beg your pardon?
Because you saying like council has failed in regards to being transparent, but council doesn't have anything to do with New Hill.
Council just appropriated $500 million to New Hill. What,
Not
you have-
500 million. That's
I'm sorry, $500,000 to New Hill. So are you saying that now council has nothing to do with it?
Well, you said that there hasn't been transparency, but New Hill has its own board. They operate as its own entity. So would you have this?
Okay,
these
so
same
let me
questions-
ask you
well, No,
this.
let me finish if I may, because I let
Please,
you.
well, you cut across me, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to if it was PHA or if it was Habitat and they had a new adventure in which they were working on, would they have to tell council and then council tell the public that they were working on such?
I would like to think that you would want to if there was a $500,000 appropriation that was going to be brought forth.
Great point.
So now, your line of reasoning is saying that there have been no discussions on council for the last 17 months in regards to this.
That's not my line of reasoning.
Okay, so then that bears
Well-
out again what I was saying. For the last 18 months, we've been asking for transparency. If these discussions have been being held for the last 17 months, it would have behooved everyone involved, I think, to at least make that known that this was coming to the floor, this was coming to the table,
Well, for one,
in my humble opinion.
sure. Well, for one, I know that that discussion hasn't been going on for 17 months. Dr. Mahone said that her students have been talking about Vinegar Hill for 17 months. That's different.
That's not the way it came across to me.
But I'm telling you, that's what she said. And I mean, that's literally what she said. In regards to your point, you said in regards to if it was PHA or someone else, you would want council to know. We've allocated 350 or 375? $350,000 to PHA for them to do their small area plan. Was there the same kind of, when we said, okay, we're with you, we support it, was it the same kind of like backlash in terms of transparency? Because we trusted their board.
Absolutely.
We allowed them
And-
to come up with their plan and they
and-
presented it to us.
And
So
you're
it's the
talking,
exact same thing.
You're talking existing entities and new entities. New Hill is new to everyone in the area right now.
And I asked PHA a lot of questions, not to
So-
interject on your time, and
Yeah.
I wasn't even here then, but you can go back and look.
There wasn't a lot of questions. asked
PHA.
to
No, I'm
New Hill
just
tonight?
saying what I didn't ask many questions tonight. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you from even before council and talking to Frank at the time when he was the CEO, I did ask a lot of questions.
And
about it.
I brought forth this same issue and complaint, if you will, about the $75,000 to the Downtown Business Association.
Well, that's different. I'm talking specifically about small area plans because that's what New Hill asked us for.
But I'm talking about appropriations of funds.
Okay, this is great. So, is there
Gadsden and I'll
somebody else
talk
that
afterwards.
would like to speak?
No, it's all love. I mean, me and I were literally just having a conversation, and we can have this discussion
Yes.
afterwards. It's no,
That's great.
it's no
All
reason
right.
why we can't.
Good evening. My name is Joy Johnson, and I reside at 8028 Harder Drive. Ms. Walker, Mayor Walker, thank you for always standing by yourself on issues that are not really transparent to the neighborhood. I've had discussion with Mr. Bellamy and Mr. Harold after I asked our staff to send an email to you all to say, hey, you know, why are we just hearing about this, right? There's always, every time something get planned, there is always the low-income folks who never, ever benefits from it. Even though that there is a low income, I see you cringing. I don't care if you agree with me or not. It's just my beliefs. Even though there's a low income person on there, which is Shamor Cooper, and I love Shamor, and I will support her, help her to be strong as she can be on that board. But you are not. It is not transparent. Well, especially when you come into council and asking them for money, it's not transparent. We have come and asked you all for money, but we make sure we're talking to other people. And Miss Galvin, Kathy, you know I love you. But there are times, Kathy, that you just make me cringe. Please, implicit biases have taught me a lot. And when you make a statement basically saying, it is a great idea. Now, I don't remember it verbatim what you said about an African American woman leading an organization. There's been several African American women who have led organization in this community, including me, and we never get that kind of accolade. I don't know if it's because it's after August 11th and 12th that this is happening, but that kind of makes us don't feel so well, the ones who are still trying their best to run an organization. Anyway, so I'm pissed, and here's why I'm pissed. It was messy what I'm hearing back there. It wasn't very clear what both of those organizations is going to do. We have organizations here like the banks and stuff that can do literacy teachings. Now I want to know, and I know my time is going to run out, but I do need to get this point across. If you're talking about my folks, my peers who I live amongst, my community who I'm a part of, and talking about literacy, financial literacy, who is going to deal with the systemic things such as barriers, crime barriers, addiction barriers, emotional barriers? Who? Because it wasn't clear to me that they was going to address that. And it wasn't clear to me that, listen, them other folks can be able to do that. And so when you're, just remember, and I just laid Mr. Bellamy out passionately, and I'm saying this to you all, I am a product of the low wealth community. I have barriers too, but mine is not as low as some of the other barriers. It must be, if you're talking about,
Thank you.
if you're talking about systemic change, you need to deal with the barriers to help people. And I don't feel like this will help our community. Our low income community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right. Yeah, okay. All right.
for a point of clarification. Somebody asked if anybody of the counselors were involved in this planning of the new hill and are on the board, and everyone said no. But according to the State Corporation
said no.
Commission,
I said no, right?
oh,
You asked us all.
well, according to the
We
State
also know.
Corporation Commission, as of today at 10:06, West Bellamy is the first listed name on the board of directors. And I would just like to know, like, when did you resign as a board of director? I think that's important for transparency, since that is the question that's being brought to this. I don't want a good project to be brought down because things are non-transparent. It seems like it's a good project, but the shadier it gets, the more flack it's going to get.
Sure. So I haven't been on the board since August 21st. Literally sent in my resignation. We had to provide all that documentation to Mr. Blair and everyone else. I'm not sure why the SEC hasn't updated their information. I know that the board, that New Hill sent in their information to the SEC in August, having them remove me off of the board. It's November 5th now. I'm not sure why that hasn't happened
I totally believe
yet.
that the website is really slow. I just think that
And we have
having that
documentation.
information out there.
And I mean, also, I have no issues or no qualms with talking about, it's documented. You can look on my Facebook. I put last year in October that the city deserves a new hill. And that's kind of like started having these conversations. There's been a multitude of people who've been working on, all right, so what does that really look like? How do we bring it to fruition? I was involved heavily in the early stages. Like I said, came off the board, haven't had any contact in that regards to make sure that there was no conflict of interest. And that's why, I mean, that's that.
Thank you.
No problem. I appreciate you asking.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, you all have a wonderful night.
Okay.
Meeting adjourned.
Before 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
All right.